Good morning, everyone. Today I want to talk a little bit about milk storage bags. I get questions occasionally about what the best brand is, about different storage bags, about storing and handling breast milk. So I'm just going to run through a couple different kinds of storage bags to kind of distinguish between the differences of what's available, what's out there. I've really found that there's 4 types of milk storage bags, and these are specifically bags that go in the freezer. You could put them in the refrigerator, but usually my recommendation is if you're going to use milk right away within a few days, hours to days, leave it in the bottle that you pumped it in, or you could put it in a pitcher, you could put it in glass, whatever your chosen method is for the fridge. And these bags really would be for if you're freezing for long term. So again, I've really found that there's 4 different kinds of bags. You have your rectangular bags like Lansano and Medela. These were some of the first storage bags really on the market. And these ones you'll usually tear off a piece and then open to fill it. And then I found that there's actually a variety that have a spout. Okay, so you fill it, you rip off the top, you pour it into the top, and then after you thaw it, you pull off this little piece and it acts as a spout. So when you're talking about general storage bags, my preference has been these with the spout. These ones can be really hard to pour out of. They can drip and leak. You can lose milk, and we cry over spilt milk in the breastfeeding community, don't we, right? So these ones are great, the old school ones that are rectangle, but I do tend to find that they can be really hard to pour out of. So they have these. Now the advantage of a rectangular one is they do stack flat. And you're not having weird angles, so they can make storage just a little bit neater if you really like a nice, precise, neat. But you have Motif has the spout. These are just Gland, kind of generic, no-name brands. Pump and Pal actually has these new ones with the spout that are color changing. And the color indicates different things. Lavender shows that it's still a low temperature or cold. Pale blue shows that it's a suitable temperature. And white shows that it's too hot. So this would be if you're trying to thaw in under hot water or in a bowl on the counter, trying to thaw that to then give it to baby. Obviously, you should never microwave breast milk ever. So just an extra feature on those. And then you have systems like the Kind. This is if you're using their bottle nipple, which I'm not a big fan of. If you've seen my review, I do a whole review on this bottle system. I feel that this has the pour spout, which is cool. But I find that these are just bulky in the freezer. They don't really stack really well. Whether you're using the rectangle ones or these, I do recommend when you fill them, don't overfill these bags. Put your portion of what you need in there. Sometimes it's 2 or 4 ounces, but if you're getting too much, it does tend to make them pretty thick. Always freeze, get all of the air out when sealing them and freeze them flat. That makes them much easier to stack. If you freeze them upright, they'll make kind of a triangle with that milk, which can make them bulkier in your freezer and not as space efficient. And then this is just one example, but there are now all kinds of silicone reusable milk bags. This one is Little One milk bag. And these can be great if you're freezing small amounts of breast milk. You're not creating a really big stash. You just want to have some emergency milk on hand because, again, these are great for storage in the fridge. But if you're trying to freeze milk in these, it makes a really awkward angle of your milk when it's frozen. But there's all kinds of silicone molds. There's 1 ounce ice cube trays, and there's breast milk popsicle trays, and there's all kinds of different ways that you can freeze them. This also is great for day-to-day use, but unless you're going to if you're going to freeze this, you'd want to put it in a Ziploc bag and then label it with the time and date, because we always want to know when you've pumped that milk or moved that milk so that we can use as fresh as possible. On all of these, definitely date. We're trying to use oldest first. CDC guidelines used to say that 6 months was optimal. We've now kind of adjusted. You'll sometimes hear up to a year is acceptable. We've always known that up to a year in the deep freezer, where it's cold, we could use that breast milk for a year. Make sure you're storing your milk at the back of the freezer where it's coldest. Again, 6 months is optimal. Up to a year is considered acceptable. And your milk is still considered frozen as long as you see ice crystals in that breast milk. So if your freezer has a malfunction, if you've taken it out and thawed it and changed your mind, as long as you're seeing slushy ice crystals, we do consider it still frozen, and it can be refrozen. If those last ice crystals have thawed, you do need to use that milk within 24 hours, and best practices, don't try to refreeze it. So these are just a bunch of the different options for storing your breast milk. And again, lots of preferences. Sometimes it comes down to which of these is the cheapest. Never use a Ziploc bag. Those are not approved for breast milk. These, because they are sealed, are better for breast milk because you're not introducing any possible bacteria, dirt, whatever from your environment into the bags. So the reason these are specific for breast milk is because they are sealed bags that you then open to put your breast milk in. We don't ever want to be using Ziploc bags. I get it. If you're in a pinch and you forget a bag, you might want to reach for something else. Store it in the bottle that you pump it into. If you don't have one of these handy. Now you know. I also wanted to add that these silicone breast milk feeders have kind of popped up on the market to be able to store your breast milk in these different small size cubes. They're usually pre-measured. A lot of them are 1 ounce or 2 ounces as bars that you can use for teethers, for teething, that you can then freeze in this more convenient way. I'm not a super fan of these for several reasons. If you're using them temporarily, as in you're freezing your milk overnight to then put immediately the next day into a teether or into a feeder, then they're great. But in reality, if you're going to be using these silicone breast milk storage things, once it's frozen, we want to know when that milk was pumped. So if you're leaving it in that tray, that's cool to then feed within a fairly short amount of time, but it's not a really good use for storing long term, because if you pop them out, you'd need to put them in another Ziploc bag and then label that bag, and then you really shouldn't be thawing that in the Ziploc bag. I'm also not a fan of using bags other than pre-approved breast milk storage bags because there is a risk of contamination. They're not considered sterile. So these silicone breast milk storage containers are great if you're going to be using that milk within the same week or maybe 2 weeks for an older baby, and not really good for long-term breast milk storage.